Welcome everyone. Thanks for participating in ASCC this year. It's really exciting. There's a lot happening in the background. What we wanted to do today was really spend a little bit of time just to familiarise yourself with the competition in a bit more detail. You can meet the people in the background that are doing all the work. And also we want to take you through some of the systems, show you what the students will be working on, how they'll be completing the challenge exercises. But also we're going to touch on some of the technical information that the students will be learning. And I think that's the most critical piece. The main reason we're doing these PD sessions is we learned from last year that to level the playing field and really give teams and students the opportunity to maximise this participation is to really educate and empower the teachers to have that knowledge. Some of the concepts we'll touch on are quite technical. And it's not about having to know it inside and out, but being familiar with the terminology and the areas that the students will be working on is really critical. So the way that we've structured these PD sessions is there'll be 5 over the next 2.5 months or so, and they'll be aligned with the content that the students are working on at the time. So it's relevant, it's current, and we're not overloading you with a lot of technical information. The technical side of things will be quite top level. We're not going into too much detail on it, but it kind of gives you an idea of what they're doing and the areas that they're working in. I just want to kind of introduce the team. The content team have been working amazingly over the last 3 to 4 weeks. So obviously I'm Ross, National Partnerships Manager. I've spoken to pretty much everyone here on the call, which is great. We've got Dr. Leah Rosenberg, who is our Head of Content at Cyber Pathways, and Marnie Thompson, who's our Content Coordinator. And from the Griffith side, we've got Dr. Ernest Fu, who's been working on the VM. So these 3 people have done a phenomenal job over the last 3 weeks to pull the competition together where we are. We're still doing a little bit of work in the background to get it ready for launch on Wednesday. But they've come such a long way, and the competition is really, really exciting this year. I think the level that they've taken the content to, the thought that they've put into ensuring that this continuity between each rounds is phenomenal, and I think the students are going to get an amazing learning experience out of the back end of this. So I just personally want to say thank you for all the work over the last few weeks. It's not finished yet, but we've done a really good job and more so them on getting this to the point that it's at today. What I'm going to do is just touch on a bit of the mechanics and the logistics around what's happening and how it happens. Marnie's going to do a little bit of a walkthrough on the virtual machines and like the LMS, so the challenge platform where they'll complete a lot of the exercises. And Ernest is going to talk a bit about cryptography today. And that's where we're getting into the technical side of things. On that note, I really want to thank Griffith for coming on board as a partner with ASCC this year. And, you know, for two main areas we're working with them. One is to deliver this PD sessions, and the other is around the virtual machining and being part of developing the challenge content. So big thanks to them and all the work that they've done. What I'll do now is I'll kind of just go through a bit of mechanics. Please note, we'll send this out. You'll get copies of this recording and the presentation. And you'll get a lot of information next week. But let me kind of go back to basics. I know you might know some of this, but I'll just make sure that you're across it all. So the way that this works is there's 2 initial rounds over the next kind of 2 months. Each round goes for 3 weeks. And so they've got that time to complete the challenge exercises. The first round obviously launches on the 19th of February. After those 2 rounds, what we do is we average the team scores. So each individual student will need to submit answers in the platform as they go, right? So they put those in there, we'll average the scores, and then at the end of the 2 rounds, it'll be the top 16 teams that will go through the semi-finals in round 3. Round 3 will work the same. So it will be 3 weeks with a challenge, like 3 exercises or so to complete over that time. And then each student will need to submit a response. We'll average the scores, and then we'll take the top 4 from those 16. Those top 4 will then go into the final round. That final round is in person in Brisbane on the 24th of June, okay? That is a 3-hour time trial. So we change it up, and I'll go through a little bit about that shortly. So the big thing is round 1 launches on 19th of February. You'll get your logins to the LMS at around 9 a.m. on that day, and students will be able to log in and start completing the activities. There's 2 pieces to this. There's they'll get a login to the LMS, and within that, a login to the virtual machine will be sent separately. That will be off the emails that you provide in the student details. Marnie will cover a little bit more about how all that works, logging in and stuff in a little bit later. On Monday next week, we're going to send out a whole range of information, like technical stuff that you need to know. So that's URLs that you need to whitelist, that's login steps, it's support channels, all of the stuff around the tech that you need to know. That'll all come in one email on Monday, and I'll probably include a recording of this so you got it all in one spot and it's easy to find. A lot of questions I've been getting is how do I best support my students? Look, these PD sessions will help you do that. Obviously, this is a competition, so we don't encourage you to do the work or tell them how to do it. Sometimes they might need guidance or a bit of a poke in the right direction, so to speak, to make sure that they're on the right track. I think the biggest thing that teachers can do is really keep them on track. You know, there's a lot of work in this. There's about 6 to 10 hours we've allocated to complete the challenge. So, you know, it's not a read a bit of theory and tick a few boxes and answer a couple of questions type. There's a lot of thinking around how to solve these problems that's out of scope of the theory. That we can give them the theory, but it's really how they approach these challenges, break them down and think about how they're going to complete them, and, you know, find the information in the virtual machine to answer the questions, okay? But I think that's really the biggest role you can play, is have some weekly checkups with the students, just make sure that they're tracking ahead. And I think that will keep them. That was where we found a few issues last year. Is just there was disparity between the amount of submissions and students and teams. So keep them on track. Make sure they're all submitting answers. I probably would look at allocating a team captain. That will come into play much more strongly in the final event as well. But I think if you have a team captain, someone who's highly, you know, technical, but can work with other people and kind of help them and guide them as well, that will really support, you know, support the team, but also help the students maximize this learning opportunity. Because they, you know, you might find they'll get stuck here and there, and that's where they really might need a bit of support. 99% of teachers last year didn't have any knowledge in this area. The top 16 teams all had technical leads at the school last year. And for us, we saw that and went, this is absolutely an opportunity to level the playing field, but also provide, you know, teachers with a baseline understanding of what the students were doing. Because there was a lot of variance in that. We had some teachers that struggled to log into the platform, and then we had some that like understood everything from going and completing the challenges. So for us, it was too much on the other end. So these will guide you throughout this and give you the support that you need. You'll get the students, the way that the content's structured will give students the foundational knowledge they need to go through those exercises. So trust us, we've got this. We'll make sure that it's an easy kind of transition for everyone. But again, this is a competition. We didn't make it simple. It is tough, but it is an amazing learning experience for the students as well. Yeah, look, the students will be accessing the internet. We lock it all down. So the platform, the LMS platform, is a leading platform that they use to deliver accredited training in our RTO land. And Azure is the virtual machine environment. So both onshore, both data sovereignty, and I believe a lot of schools are already using Microsoft as well. We try and limit where possible and is those external links and taking them to random websites and just kind of letting them go in the internet to do stuff. It's quite contained in the platform there. This year, what we've done is roll out a tech support. So there's a support line for teachers and students as well. We'll send, again, that will come out on Monday, but that's just support@cyberpathways.com.au. And you just need to send an email and the team sitting there monitoring it on a daily basis, and we'll triage any of those requests that come through. The idea of these PD sessions too was to help you with the knowledge to be able to potentially triage really basic stuff that they might come up with. Probably one tip I'll give you is planning's key. Like I said, there's 6 to 10 hours in this. This is not, and that's what we average. Like some students finished just smashed it out last year in a day and just got it done. Others struggled. And so it's really about making sure you plan it, check in with them on a weekly basis and make sure that they're completing the exercises. Each one of those students, not necessarily say, hey, he's completing, and they'll go, yeah, well, and the reason I say that, because if you've got a team of 4 or 5 and one student doesn't enter anything in that system, your average will drop and guaranteed you won't get into the top 16. So that's really where it's important to work as a team and make sure that you're all submitting responses to those answers when you need to in the LMS. And at the end of the day, even if some of them are wrong, as long as you're putting some right answers in there, you're going to bump up your team average. As much as this is about technical, those core skills that sit around it are really what we want to embed in the students as well. So communication, planning, collaboration, time management, they are critical. If you don't do that, you won't have a lot of success in this competition because it's individual self-paced learning in the sense that they can go through this and understand it, but they've got to communicate, they've got a plan to get through the exercise and collaborate to get, as a team. And like I say, in the final round, you'll really see who works as a team because we make the challenge impossible for one person to finish in 3 hours. So it is absolutely about working as a team. And by the final round, they will have all the technical skills to be able to go and do this on their own. Apart from that, the main reason that we are, one of the big focal points about ASCC is career pathways. So this is why we're working with industry and education, so the university sector like Griffith, to showcase students, once you have these skills and have an inherent interest in this, you've actually worked at an industry standard and industry level, you're using industry terminology and industry tools. So if we can connect them to the study pathway options that are out in market in cybersecurity, and we can bring internships and work experience to the table, we can start to have a massive impact on the cyber skills gap in Australia. Now, right now, Australia needs 17,000 cyber workers, skilled workers, and in the next 4 years, it's estimated to be about 30,000. The pipeline coming out of university is not enough. So for us, this is about how can we contribute to that biggest skills gap issue at a national level, but also give the students the knowledge and the skills that industry is looking for in collaboration with the study pathways that university provide, and then the internship. So if you marry all those 3 up, we should be good. We've got Data3 on board that is looking at bringing internship programs, and we've got a verbal from Australian Signal Directory, so ASD. They should be coming on board in the next 2 weeks, and they have got volume amount of internship programs, this would be a recruitment strategy for them. And I think I've said this terminology to a lot of people. I think ASCC in the next few years can be the grassroots football of cyber talent in Australia. These kids are bright, they're smart, they know what they're doing. And if we can give them the right structured kind of foundational skills and introduction to industry, we can have a really big impact in the area. That's enough for me at the moment anyway. I'm going to pass over to Marnie. Marnie's going to walk through a little bit around the LMS and the virtual machinings. Like I said, you've got the chat function there. Please ask questions as we go. I think because we're covering so much in this webinar, what we'll do is we might answer them as they kind of come up relevant rather than at the end. But we will have some time at the end as well. So please send through any of your questions. I think no doubt you may have some. So Marnie, over to you, mate. I'll stop sharing and it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ross. So I am going to take everybody basically on a walkthrough of what it will look like for your students. You will have access to this as well. But basically, it's the overview of how they will see the LMS and how they will connect from the virtual machines within that. So first port of call is going to be, I'm going to share our LMS platform, which is Accelerate, which is an RTO level platform. This is what students will see when they first log in. They will see Australian Schools Cyber Challenge as a course option. They will be able to go in to the learning plan of this, which means they will be able to see the modules within those rounds as they come up. So currently I have a test version of our round 1 module. This will include just a privacy notice regarding the virtual machine usage, as these are provided by Griffith, an overview of the theory content within these rounds, formative practice units that they will be able to see, as well as the final challenge. So if I go back to my other one, because I grabbed the wrong one. Okay, no, apparently my theory ones have decided to be a little bit weird. But realistically, there will be a total of 9 theory units that the students will have access to that they can complete at their own pace, that will be interactive, informative, and cover everything that they need to know to be able to complete the round 1 challenges. So as an example, this is one of the base units of which they will see. This is a draft version, which I will switch over. So this is one of the first units they will be able to see. They will be able to click through this. It covers everything that they'll go through. This is our introduction to cybersecurity. So this is just the basic overview as to what is cybersecurity, just to get the kids into the hang of it. They'll be able to go through this. There are questions at the end of each of the theory modules, just so that they can test their understanding. If there's anything that is confusing to them, they can go back, have a read. It's very flexible in what they can do, just so that they're comfortable with what they are learning and where they are on the topics. Again, this is all interactive because some of these topics can be quite heavy hitting. So we want to be able to make sure that, you know, it's a bit more enjoyable. It's not so theory heavy, so they can get through it and then get into the practical stuff. So they'll make their way through these units. There is a total of 9 that they will go through. So if I jump back over to this tab, they will have formative practice activities as well. These are not accessible. So this is more just so that they can have a bit more of an understanding of what maybe some of the questions are asking in terms of just the concept rather than in the context of the challenge. Within the context of our challenge, we have built a very elaborate story with the great help of Ernest, but obviously sometimes that might get a little bit confusing. So we will have formative practice challenges in there just so that they can test their understanding, get used to the tools, all this kind of thing that will be within the Accelerate platform. So these are just a couple of demo ones. I will have the more specific ones when we release everything on the 19th. From here, they will go into the challenges. There will be quizzes available that will contain the questions for the challenges. We will be breaking it down a little bit more so that it's not as overwhelming. So they will go in, they will submit answers. They can save their answers if they're not quite ready to commit to submission. We will be taking the most recent answer for each student as their final answer come round one close. From here, they will be able to connect in with the virtual machines. So there will be a base link here just to be able to get through it, but they will obviously be able to access it from the secondary email that will be sent directly to them from Microsoft Azure. So once they click into this, it will come up with being able to log in using a Microsoft account. I can go in as signed. And when it decides it wants to load, they will be able to see the virtual machines at which they have access to. They will only have access, obviously, to the one for round one. They will be able to go in, see it. What I will demonstrate now is being able to connect to this virtual machine using Windows. There's only one additional step when it comes to using a Mac, which is the download of the Windows app from the App Store, which will allow for the remote desktop connection. This app is free for Mac and realistically is only one other step in this process. It has been tested to work pretty much in the exact same way. Very clean connection. Pretty much like very straightforward. So with these virtual machines, as you can see, we have Windows virtual machines. This one is currently turned on. If I click to start the virtual machine, this might take 10 to 20 minutes to load just by the nature of remote desktop connections. They'll be able to connect through here. If it gets to the point where they'll have any issues, they will be able to reset the virtual machine, say in case somebody breaks something or forgets something or delete a file that they were missing. This is the remote desktop information. This is how they will be able to connect. Each student's remote desktop connection will be unique, and this information will be sent through to you and to them. So once this virtual machine loads, I will be able to show the connection to it. I don't know how well it's going to go just because obviously I am sharing screen and in the call at the same time. So now is probably a really good time while we wait. If anybody has any questions regarding whatever I have said or what Ross has said, this would be a good time.
Marnie. One of the other things I'd like them to, you could probably point out is see there's the 3 dots in that box there. You can show them the 3 box in, menu. Yeah, so inside the 3 box menu, there's a re-image option. And so what that re-image option is that if the student does something bad, like deletes everything on the virtual machine, it's possible to get the original version of the machine back again. So you just need to click the re-image, and again, it'll take about 20 minutes, I suppose, for it to re-image, and then it basically makes a copy again of the original, and so you get back to the same state. So the student shouldn't worry too much about if they mess anything up or something like that. They can always re-image and maybe have a cup of coffee in between while waiting. Now, I'm sure this was much faster when we tested it out earlier, Marnie.
Yeah, it was for me too, definitely. And again, this is online. And I think, and Ernest, would you agree that it's depending on the traffic to the machines and that
it depends on the end, the back end in Azure, how loaded it all is. But I guess that took maybe 5 minutes for us to get that happening. So
cool, go for it, Marnie.
Sure. Now that it is up and running, I will connect to the virtual machine. It will ask me to download a file, an RDP file, in order to be able to connect. This is pretty normal. Now, I will just slightly adjust how I'm sharing my screen, just because it takes it out of the browser window, which means I want to do this.
Yeah, that's good money.
Cool. So it will come up with asking for the remote connection. This is particularly normal with most virtual machines, because obviously you are connecting to a machine that, one, doesn't physically exist, and two, could be very well anywhere in the country. Thankfully, we know where these are. So I will connect through to it. It will ask me for a password. I will put in currently what the password is, which I don't know whether we have shared it. But otherwise, we have a particular teacher one for the moment, obviously, to be able to show for PD. I will connect through to it. And we'll be able to see the inside of the Windows virtual machine. Now, the challenge machine itself will also be a Windows virtual machine. This is not it. This is a test dummy. We do not want to release the challenges that little bit too early. But this is very much what the students will see and what you will see in the actual challenge. This is actually the same background. So all of the applications that are needed for the challenge are currently existing on the virtual machine. All of the files that the students will need to be able to complete the challenge will exist on the virtual machine. All of that information will be there. The only thing outside of the virtual machine required to complete the challenges will be the quiz that will exist in the LMS to be able to submit the answers for marking. So they will be able to interact with this virtual machine the same way they would interact with a regular PC. For most students, if they're used to using a Mac or a Chromebook, it might take a little bit to wrap their head around, but in terms of being able to complete the challenge, it will not have that much effect on their actual completion, just the getting used to a new operating system. So they'll be able to interact with everything on the desktop. They'll be able to interact with files. It might be a little bit slow, obviously, because it is a remote connection, but it will be relatively simple to get through.
Hey, Marnie, I've just got a question, sorry, while we're on it.
Yes.
Do the learning modules count towards the team score?
The theory modules will not count towards the team score. No, they are purely formative, as are the formative practice exam.
And so it's they need to find the answers in the VM for the quiz. Basically.
Yes. So all of the answers for the challenges will exist in the virtual machine. The theory units will assist them in finding those answers in the machine, either whether they might be decrypting something or analyzing files. That will, from what they have learned from those theory units, they will be able to apply it when they go into the virtual machine to help them find the answers. So the only thing that they will be marked on is their submissions for the challenge questions.
Great. Am I able to share the password for this one, or are we waiting till next week?
I don't know. I guess so. It's up to you, Ross.
For the so is this competition stuff in this virtual machine at the moment?
No.
This is the one for the teachers.
For the teachers. Okay, I'll share the password with everyone in the Q&A, and then what would actually be really good is if you could tomorrow or Monday go and test this on your school's network with your school machine. And if you're having any problems logging in, please let me know and we can kind of triage that before we launch. So we're going to do a lot of testing next week, but that's one thing you might be able to do this week just to kind of get ahead of the 8 ball with it. Thanks, Manny. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's realistically all I have regarding the walkthrough. If anybody has any questions about connecting to the virtual machines or the theory content or the LMS platform itself, now is probably a really good time before we get stuck into a bit more of the technical theory.
Probably one thing I will flag out I've noticed this week. So if you notice when we logged into the virtual machine, there was some 10 hours allocated. Probably a good practice for the students is make sure if they're not in the virtual machine or actually doing stuff in there that they're logged out, because if they're logged in, they will clock the time. So just make sure. That's probably one thing you could communicate to the students, and we'll make sure we do that as well.
And that is not so much not being in the window, because I can close the window and disconnect my remote session. It will be a matter of turning the machine off. So if they leave it running, they go, and even if it's just idle in their desktop because they've gone off onto some other brain thought, that's going to chew through their 10 hours. So if they're not actively working in the virtual machine, I would recommend turning it off so that way they can actually conserve their 10 hours.
One of the other things to realize as well is that the virtual machines will turn themselves off as well, because we don't want the kids eating up the 10 hours, right? So it will check to see if the system is idle, and then after 15 minutes of idle time, it will turn itself off. So if someone's sitting there contemplating life for a long time and looking at it, if they look at it for 15 minutes without clicking on something or typing something, then the system will go, oh, you've walked away, and it'll turn itself off, which is fine because you can come back and turn it back on again. But that's what happens. Though it is probably rather best to be safe than sorry, because sometimes also the system doesn't necessarily perfectly recognize that you're not idle either. So there is a fail-safe, but you probably do want to tell them that when you finish doing your work, you can turn it off. Now, the other thing is the 10 hours. Look, if something does happen, like say it doesn't trigger, or it stays on for days and days and stuff. Yeah, so just let the support team know, and we can add additional hours onto that student's machine as well. So it's just there so that we kind of like can monitor and see how much time people can use as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that does actually. I might now, if no one's got anything more with the VMs, and again, feel free to send questions through. I'm going to get these slides up for you, Ernest. What we're going to do now is we're going to crack into a bit of technical stuff. So I know I'm going to learn a lot here. Mani, were you going to do your fishing?
I mean, I can do the fishing one first. That shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, do that. I've got it up. Let's do that quickly. Go in order. Sorry, we'll just jump quickly into fishing. Do you want to drive, or do you want me to?
I can drive because I have a copy of it on my own machine. I might just be looking a little bit sideways just so I can read the notes of which I have. All right. PowerPoint. One of these days. One of these days. There we go. Cool. Everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. So, to outline a little bit of context, we have 3 topics going into the round 1 challenges, 2 of which will be phishing and encryption, which is what we're covering today in terms of a bit more technical content. For the PD on the 25th, covering round 1 content, that will cover the 3rd topic. So realistically, to get straight into it, when looking at phishing, this one is probably going to be one of the simplest technical concepts that you will have to understand to be able to help your students, but also it's going to be one of those ones where the students themselves will pick it up very, very quickly. It's not actually all that tough and scary. So what phishing is it's a scam. It's fraudulent attempts to deceive people into disclosing information or to install malware or to do stuff that they wouldn't usually do. It's not unheard of. Everybody's heard of a scam going around at any given point. It's one of the more prevalent cyber attacks, or that just kind of has gotten more and more sophisticated as technology has gone on. It could come through in any format. Most of these are emails, SMSs, phone calls, and the odd website, realistically. The people will set up purely for nefarious purposes. Everybody has probably heard of scam emails going around. There's a variety of these that can go through. Everybody's kind of heard a little bit of like the ones where they joke about, you know, the Nigerian prince leaving you money. There's the ones where it's like, oh no, you've been locked out of your account, or people you know that are sending you things that you know full well that they've not sent you. It's very much one of those ones where when you know what to recognize, you will recognize it quite easily. For a lot of people where there is that side to, say, digital hygiene, where it's not talked about or it's not understood, that's usually who gets caught out in these phishing attacks. That's usually who the target is. Falling victim of these crimes as just an individual or as an organization can result in a bunch of concerning crimes, which can go anywhere from complete identity theft to loss of personal information to complete disruption of your systems, your devices, getting locked out, reputational damage for a lot of major companies where there have been as a result of somebody putting out a scam. You often will use a concept that is called social engineering, which will get explained a little bit more when you actually have a look at the LMS, which is the psychological tactic behind it. It's the being able to deceive convincingly of the target in mind, to be able to manipulate people into clicking links or giving up information, doing stuff that if they trust who it is from, or they don't have any reason to suspect that it might be a scam or it might be a cyber attack, they will just do. And this can range from, you know, generic targets where you'll get mass emails or mass texts to more targeted attacks specifically towards a certain victim. And from a variety of different technology, now that things have obviously, you know, gotten a lot more modern, people will use artificial intelligence to be able to tailor these scams, to be able to fake voices, to be able to use text-to-speech to do so, and add multiple layers to these phishing attacks to make them more and more convincing. Thankfully, despite everything, they are still relatively easy to notice a lot of the time. So in theory, maybe 85% of phishing scams or anything like that, people will still be able to recognize. And there are some telltale signs to be able to do that. This is going to be helpful information in terms of not only your everyday life, but also towards these challenges. And the students will get it too. A lot of it, to some extent, is quite literally spot what is suspicious, spot the differences between what would be a legitimate email and what would not be. So going into what is included in a phishing email, the best way to learn how to avoid becoming a victim of it is analyzing the legitimacy of these emails, some recognizing indicators of it. Again, this is more digital hygiene than technical, so it's a good concept to learn. So this could be anything from a generic greeting that you wouldn't usually see in a communication, say from a bank. Urgent requests, so this could be, oh, you know, you need to change your password, your account's been locked down, your information's out of date. It's attachments and links in ways that it wouldn't usually present. It's suspicious. You wouldn't necessarily be clicking a link to update your details for a bank. It's incorrect sender emails. So it might say, oh, we're from Microsoft, but the account that's sending it might be a Gmail account that makes no sense and has nothing to do with what you're doing. There are spelling and grammar email errors in official communications. You would not expect there to be spelling errors in communications from a bank or from a major organization, because emails like that go through 3 different checks to make sure that everything has gone out smoothly. It's incorrect, suspicious organization details. It might be a logo that's no longer used, or just the way it's presented is not the same as communication you might have received before. Conflicting information. So it could be the title of the email is one thing, the text in it is another, and the link it's trying to send you to is something completely different altogether. Often there'll be requests for sensitive information. That's your bank details, that's your personal information, that's information that you would not just be giving up via email or via text message, and sometimes maybe not even over the phone. It's also stuff where it tries to appeal to the greed of people, where it's prizes that are too good to be true. It's the very much the you have been left $1 million in somebody's will that you have no idea who that person is. It's not always, grand gestures. Sometimes it is quite literally just the tiniest thing that when you spot it, you will understand, okay, that's not quite right. But for a lot of people, they will just gloss over the communication. They will have a look, go, oh, it's an email from Microsoft. They might not even think to double check what it's actually going on about. And that's part of the digital hygiene skills that we obviously want to teach. But it's also going into that technical skill of, if you are, say, working for an organization that is receiving these emails, or one of your customers has received this email, that's skills where obviously working as a cybersecurity professional, you will see a lot of. And that's something that obviously we want the students to understand, because in the context of these challenges, it's a skill set they're going to use. So looking at a basic phishing email. This email is fake. It is very clearly fake. The easiest way to be able to tell that is the actual email address from the Microsoft team is not one that they would usually use. This is not a communication that they would usually use for this kind of activity. If we have a look at the subject line of this email, it says an error report. When you look at the body of this email, it says unusual sign-in activity. It's conflicting information. What is it actually looking for? When you read a little bit further down in this information, so where I have green and pink highlights, there is grammar errors and missing words and punctuation errors that would not be present in an official Microsoft email. In terms of when you actually read through it, it's also not how Microsoft handles things. If you've ever had a Microsoft account and you've had unusual sign-in activity because you've logged in another device, this is not how they tend to present their sign-in emails. There is a fake phone number attached to it. Microsoft is not going to ask you to immediately report something to a phone number. It's not their way. But it could be an additional layer to this particular scam, where calling somebody and ending up with a voice-to-text operator that you are going to be talking to that you might not necessarily recognize. The button that has a link with a URL that you might not know. If you hover over it when you're actually looking at it in Outlook or just in any form of live email, you'll be able to see whether that link looks legitimate, but often it's not. It's just a bunch of characters. But if you don't know what to look for, you're liable to just click that button. Yeah, that's the bit I was missing. Again, with these emails, often the call to action is not that direct. And that is part of it, is trying to, build the urgency of, okay, cool, something is wrong. You need to act on it, so that people don't think about what they're looking at. They just do. And that's one of the things that usually gets people with these particular scams, is they look at something, they freak, they just go and do it. Looking at this one, this is an AI-generated spam email. So there is a legitimate email from Outlook, and there is also a fake email that was generated with AI. Take a moment to have a look at the differences. See if you can find the differences, because they look very, very similar. And just have a think, looking back at what indicators there are as to what might be different, what might be indicative that something is not quite right with this fake email. So if anybody has any questions in the meantime, now is probably a good time. And then I will go through very quickly what is actually wrong with this particular email and why we want to talk about AI generated emails, because there is this aspect where the use of AI is making phishing more sophisticated, harder to spot, and that is an ongoing and ever-evolving problem that cybersecurity professionals will now have to face. Your students will face it as part of their challenge, but it's also a good one to understand as an everyday person, especially working for a major organization like school, that you may end up a target, and these are the things that you need to look for. So if anybody's got any...
Ernest, from your perspective, obviously, did you have anything you want to add, from that technical side?
So I think one of the things to look at, and what we kind of also expect the kids to eventually look at, is to look at the header information on these emails. And especially on real systems, the header information's usually hidden away. So students should be able to kind of like try to find the options to look at that. Another thing that students can do is they can export emails to a text file. So there's a .eml file. You can usually export an email to a .emx file, and then you can open it up with Notepad or something like that. Then you should be able to see all the header information inside there as well. So sometimes the header information can give some indications other than just the text and those kind of things. So that was a big hint, wasn't it?
Yeah, great.
All right.
So go for it, Marnie. Show us.
So there are about 8 differences between these 2 emails. That is, if you have a look at the from address, it is RN Microsoft rather than Microsoft, to be able to replicate the M without actually using it. The email subjects are different. The phishing one is that bit more pushy, that bit more demanding, whereas the official one is more informative. Within the text itself, we are missing the blocked out version of the recipient email, which is where Microsoft will use it to confirm your identity, just to make sure that if you've received the email and that's not your email address, it's like, oh, well, that's not me. That bit is completely blocked out. There is the tiniest differences of a couple of extra spaces before commas, a couple of spelling mistakes in terms of calendar being spelled incorrectly, the extra I in live in the link, which somebody did spot, but that link is also replacing the button and is also very clearly that little bit sketchy. There is also the different objectives between the link and the button. The button is to reset, is to be able to actually review the recent activity, to be able to review, okay, what that sign-in activity is. If it was you, so be it. The link is to reset your password. going through to reset your password might mean that you're going through to a fake reset page where you will, or it might be a genuine one with some form of malware sitting in the background because you've clicked that link that will then go, oh, I now know your new password. You genuinely reset the password, but something was watching. For a lot of people, especially if they are not technologically literate, especially if they have not been experienced with using emails or anything like that, foreign concept in a modern day, but still very applicable. Or even if they're just, running through their day, rushing through, okay, cool, there's another email from Microsoft, I'll fix that up. A lot of people will not pick these differences unless they are actually looking at what they're doing. And that's part of it, is to get people where they're not looking, where they're not really caring about what they're seeing, or they don't realize what they're seeing. And that is how people will end up victims of these phishing attacks. Now, for students, that spot the difference is something they've been doing since primary school. We're applying that kind of same logic of, okay, there's something not quite right. What is missing? What is wrong? To a very common cybersecurity practice. It's not technical, but it does require a little bit of thinking and a bit of problem solving, and they're going to use that skill set when they get into the challenge. If anybody has any questions, otherwise I will stop sharing my screen, and Ernest, it's on to you.
Good work, Marnie. I popped a little poll up there. I love these things. They're so cool when you use your tech. So I just thought, I just came to him. I was like, how many have actually been caught? I know I have. It's funny. One of our head of marketing sent out an email yesterday, and there was a phishing scam where they tried to get her to change the bank details for pay. It was really sophisticated. And it came just before payday, and it was quite well done. So, she sent it out and said, "Don't click on this." So it was, but I know I've had a few incidents, but no money. Thankfully, no money's gone missing. But I'll keep that poll up for a little bit. But what we'll do is, we'll pass over to Ernest now. So we're going to get into that was light. Now we get into some heavy stuff. So this is encoding and encryption. So I'll just share my screen. And again, Ernest, just let me know when you want.
Yep. Thanks, Ross, for being the driver. I was too scared.
It's slow.
Well, I think I'm having internet connections as well, because you can't see my face. I think it just disappears all the time. So hello, everybody. This is a close-up of me, and now I'm going.
There you go. You should be able to see those slides.
All right, awesome. So there are several classes of challenge in the first round. So the first class of challenge is in the phishing emails, and the second class of challenge, which we'll talk about this evening, is the encryption. Now, I think one of the things with computer systems is that it actually, if you dig down into computers and stuff, as you all know probably, it's all ones and zeros, right? And humans don't read or understand things in ones and zeros, so there needs to be some way of converting between the two. And so that's where we come up with encoding. Okay, so we need to encode the ones and zeros into something that humans can read. Okay, and sometimes though we try our best to convert things from ones and zeros, but humans still can't read it anyway. So one of the classic ways of converting values is to convert our bit stream into hexadecimal values. So that's where we get 16 bits or 4 bits of characters and convert them into a hexadecimal value. And so as you can see there in the diagram, you can get some bit stream into weird numbers there. And then so there's a table, and as you can see to the side there's a table, and you can see the ones and zeros represents the numbers from 0 to F, and the reason why it's hexadecimal is because it's 16 characters, and you might go, why 16? Well, you know, in computers, everything, the computer architecture is set in groups of 8, and 16 is 2 groups of 8. So one group of 8 was too small, really. So 2 groups of 8 is where it is. All right, next slide. Right, so there's many different types of encoding systems, and another encoding system is base64. So in the old days, everyone wanted to do things in text only. So base64 was originally designed to transmit binary files, so ones and zeros again, but as text. So, you know, instead of sending your computer program in ones and zeros over the network, you'd convert it into base64, and everything would be in letters and numbers, and then it'd like transfer over, and then you'd convert it back to ones and zeros, and then you'd be able to do it again. I don't know why people did that, but they used to do that. Base64's stuck around with us. So you can see it's basically the same thing. You get a stream of ones and zeros, you split that up into certain sizes, and then you can convert them over into the appropriate letter. Now, the interesting thing about base64 is that it's actually an encoding system that's grouped into 6 bits. And if we've got an unusual, like a length of string or message that we want to encode that's not exactly divisible by 6, what happens? What it does is it adds 2 special characters onto the end, and that's equal sign. So you can tell your students that if you see a garbled message and there's 1 or 2 equal signs on the end, you can almost guess that that's a base64 string that needs to be converted. So now, one of the other things that's interesting is that I've said encoding here, and I haven't said encryption. And there's a big difference between the two. So encoding is all about representation of data, but it's, you know, you can convert it over using a well-known table. So you've seen in the slides here, there's a well-known table. So there's no actual secrecy here. There's only secrecy from humans because humans can't quickly decipher the things. Though, of course, if we were brought up and taught base64 and we read everything in base64, of course we'd understand it. But not many people do. So, but if we have the table, you could sit down and convert everything over. Right? So it's not secure as in security, but it is hidden, if that makes sense. All right, so talking about security and hiding things, let's go to the next slide. Yay, so this is where cryptography comes in, because this is encryption rather than encoding. And what's the main difference between the two is that that the key is secret, right? So you'd imagine that the key in encoding is the table, but everybody knows the table. But in cryptography, the key is supposed to be secret. So if no one knows the key, then it's very hard to be able to decrypt the message. Okay, so I'm going to use some terminology now for the next few bits when we talk about encryption. There's 3 things to remember. I think they're on the next slide, but we'll keep it on this slide anyway. The first thing is plain text. So when I say plain text, I mean the original message that everyone can read. Right? Then I also will mention the word key. So the word key can be different things, but it's basically something that helps us to encrypt something. And in modern cryptography, it's a whole bunch of ones and zeros or a really large number because there's mathematics involved. But in simple classical ciphers like the Sievers cipher, it's just shifting the characters over a little bit, but it's the number of times you shift things that's the key. All right, so we talked about plain text, we talked about keys. The last thing I want you to hear about is ciphertext. So ciphertext is actually the encrypted text, right? So it's the plain text after it's been converted. So that little green ticket there, I think, is, well, it's the original text, but then we shift things. If you click the button, Ross will go to the next animation, and I think you'll see. No, oh, it didn't animate. Okay, we'll go back. So it should have yeah, all right. It should have done shown you the encrypted string, but yeah. So anyway, the encrypted string will give some rubbish down there. So there's two very famous classical ciphers, and we talk about classical ciphers because classical ciphers were created, I guess, pre-World War One. I think it's when basically classical ciphers were ciphers that were made before we decided to do ciphers with maths. Okay, so there's two main types of classical ciphers. One is substitution, where we substitute a letter for another letter, or transposition, where we shift the letter from one place inside the message to another place inside the message, right? And then people were able to crack those, so then they actually combine the methods of substitution and transposition together in very curious ways. So the Caesar cipher has been around since Roman times because you know, Caesar is like Roman kings, so they were around since then. It's a very easy cipher that most people or kids might have seen on the back of a cereal box in the morning where they've got this secret message that you have to decode. And basically what the Caesar cipher does is it shifts the character along by so many characters. And then, so in the case here, if we've got B and we're going to shift B across by, is it 1, 2, 3 characters, then the result is an E. All right, so then in your ciphertext, you'd write down E. So if you had a plain text, you had B, you'd write down E in the ciphertext. And then if you had, say, for example, a letter C in your plain text, you'd shift it along 3 and you'd put the letter F down, etc., etc., as you go through. And it does come up with a very, like, you know, plausible, random-looking character set for humans to see. There's another classical cipher, which is the Virginaire cipher, and because people are able to crack the Caesar cipher after a while. And the Virginaire cipher is basically where they said, hang on, let's just use the Caesar cipher multiple times. So instead of that, they would basically say we'd have a word, a 5-letter word, and then or 5-letter code, and we'd say, okay, first letter shift by 5, next letter shift by 1, next letter shift by 3, next letter shift by 4, and then next letter shift by 10 or something, right? And then start the pattern again, shift by 5, 1, 3, 10, whatever I said the pattern was again. So that way each column in your message had like a different kind of shifting, if that makes sense. So that again made things really harder to crack. Let's go to the next slide. So the next slide is talking about how do we crack these types of ciphers, and basically what the people realized was that even though we're shifting the characters around, we're not changing the frequency of those letters as they show up on this on the message. So if you study language, which I guess some people do, you'd find that there are some letters in the English alphabet that appear more than others and some which are less. So it looks like the letter E is the most popular letter in the English language, right? On average, if you do massive statistical kind of like, take a like couple of like maybe the Bible or something and then looked at how many times does E occur. Well, it occurs more than all the others, right? E and T are really popular. And then of course there are some characters which are really not popular, like Q and X, right? They don't show up very much. And Z is really, and we already knew that from Scrabble, because like in Scrabble the lower frequency ones have higher points and stuff like that. So So what you can do is, if you have got a classical cipher in front of you, you can count all the letters and try to work out which one is the letter E, right? Because maybe it appears more times than any other. Then you substitute the letter E for that letter. Then you go through and you say, well, what's the second most often? T, right? So let's substitute T. And then the third most is A, so let's substitute A for the third most, etc., till we go through all the things. And, you know, we might not get it right every time, but we might get enough right that we can work out the message and then adjust accordingly. So that's basically how you kind of like crack a classical cipher. So, and of course, in the challenge, I'm giving a big hint away, there will be some of these that you need to decrypt, and like there's a lot of online web pages that will help you, and there's one down there. There's lots of them actually, but this one is a nice one because it allows you to actually substitute it, and it'll allow you to put the letters in, and then it'll automatically substitute. You can test things out until you reckon that you've got the right message or not. All right, so that's basic cryptography. Let's go on to the next one. All right, so well, the basic cryptography was great until we got computers, right? So there's only until we had computers where someone could easily go and calculate the frequency of the number of letters that turn out many times, you know what I mean? So back in the old days, no one would actually think about counting at all. Whereas if you've got a computer, you can just write a little program to do that. And in actual fact, for those people who have higher level students out there, I'd imagine grade 11 and 12s, they could write their own Python program to actually crack these things. So they don't need to actually use the online tools, though I'm expecting the younger students to be able to go online and try those web pages out. Okay, so anyway, once we got computers, people started realizing, if we're going to secure something, we're going to have to make it mathematically secure, right? So, so in here, modern cryptography, again, we've got the plain text, we've got the key, and the key gets fed into the cipher, right? So you can imagine the cipher as a mathematical problem that gets run to, a mathematical function that you calculate things through, and then out comes the ciphertext, right? And modern ciphers are supposed to make sure that the ciphertext is supposedly truly random. So what they mean by truly random is that there's a 50% chance that the next 1 and 0 in the stream would be a 1 or a 0. Okay, so it makes it really hard to break things, and yeah, but it's not unheard of. Sometimes in the olden, well, not the olden days of modern cryptography, people did make some errors, and so they they were found out, they were cracked. But nowadays, 20, 40 years onwards since modern cryptography started, 40, probably late 70s. Anyway, yeah, so now we have standards, and so the latest and standard which everyone should use is the AES standard, the Advanced Encryption Standard that America puts out. So now the thing with cryptography is the length of the key is the security of the key. So modern cryptography, the length of the key is how strong the key, strong the algorithm is. Okay. Now it's really interesting because this type of cipher and all these types of ciphers that we've looked at before, what happens is that you get your message, you run it through the key, and you produce a ciphertext. So we did that before with the was it the B going to the E? We did it one letter at a time. Same thing happens in modern symmetric ciphers, right? We just go one bit at a time, right? Or one chunk at a time, right? But the chunk can only be as big as the key, right? And and you're wondering, how big are these keys? So the original modern ciphers, the DES one had a key of 56 bits, so 56 1s and zeros. AES in its first production was 128 bits. So 128 ones and zeros. Nowadays, if you're going to encrypt something, it's probably 256 ones and zeros. But you're saying to yourself, Ernest, I have messages that are longer than 128 bits. How do you encrypt something that's longer than that? And so, because you understand what I'm talking about, right? You have to get the message and then run it past the key to get the ciphertext. But your key is only 128 characters, ones and zeros long. So you only can get a message that's 128 that goes through to make that ciphertext. So there's another thing called modes, ciphertext modes. And the modes are different ways of joining these blocks together. So this particular type of cipher is called a block cipher because, and you can see block cipher encryption, block cipher decryption there. It's because you're doing things a block at a time, but how do you join the blocks? And so that's the next slide. Right, so originally there was all of these joining the blocks were called modes, right? So the original one was electronic code book mode, ECB, right? But if you use the same message to encrypt something with the same key, you get the same ciphertext, right? So that's weird, isn't it? But it's true. If you think about the classic ciphers, every time I get a B, I'm going to shift it over 3 to get the E. Every time it's going to be the same, right? And that's the same thing that happens with modern ciphers, right? And you can see here we got a little picture of the penguin, and if we encrypt it using ECB mode, you're kind of going, hey, I can still see the penguin, kind of. It's different because it's been encrypted, but you can see the patterns are the same, right? So you can still see the penguin, and that's not good, right? We want it to be like other modes, right? So the other modes, the cipher block chaining mode, is the one that everybody uses. And what does it do that's different? It adds a little piece of randomness to everything. So next slide.
Ernest, I'm going to ask a question here. So
Sure.
is that crypto? So is that how they run the blockchain?
Yep. No. This is different again. So
Okay,
blockchains, I can give another talk on blockchains if you like.
Yeah.
Blockchains are storing different other kinds of information, but this is blocks as in like groups of data kind of thing,
Right,
which those
okay.
blockchains are too, but it uses a different type of cryptography, which is a story for another day.
Yeah, I've got a question. Is the Enigma code used by Germany Classic, and then it's ROT13 code?
Right. So the Enigma code is classic because they shifted things around, they transposed things, and they did things in a really kind of clever way. But it was all mechanical in the end. And you'll note with the Enigma machine, it's a machine. Right? There's not necessarily calculations that need to be done. In actual fact, like I was saying, World War I, World War II, it wasn't till after, I'm thinking, I could be wrong here, but I'm thinking it wasn't till after or around World War II where they started to do things. And it's mainly because of computing power that did it, that got people to move more into the mathematics field, like cryptography to move in that direction. Everything else before was all about shifting things around. And so, yeah, if you look at the insides of the Enigma machine, there's a whole bunch of letters like A to Z and on a spindle that would spin according to the key for the day kind of thing. So yeah. So that was the first question about the Enigma machine. ROT13.
That's
so
it?
what?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, someone was asking about ROT13. So ROT13 is a classic cipher because what ROT13 is, it's actually a Caesar cipher, right? It's actually a Caesar cipher that rotates. Basically, it moves 13 letters along instead. It's a standard 13 letters that it moves instead of like my example of 3 before. right? So it rotates 13. And why is it a rotation? Because in the English language, there's 26 characters. And so if you go halfway, it's 13, right? So it's the most you can move a letter to another letter, right? So if you start moving it beyond that, you start going backwards in terms of like you're shifting backwards instead of forwards, kind of thing, if that makes sense, if you can picture it in your mind. So another interesting thing about ROT 13, because you're halfway, if you encrypt something once and you encrypt it again with ROT 13, you get the original back. Because you're just moving at 13, right? And it's like 26 all the way, so you just move it back to the original. So that's the interesting thing about ROT 13. I didn't know that you rigged the questions, Ross, so I could tell that story.
That's
all right.
Great one.
So, all right. So we talked about the blocks, right? And there's a whole reason why I'm telling you about this is because there's parameters that you need to feed into programs, and one of the parameters is the IV, the initialization vector, right? So this is what happens with cipher text block code mode, chaining mode. And that's basically where you get each of the blocks, right? And you get a piece of randomness. You can see the initialization vector, which is a random number, goes in there and it gets XORed with the plaintext before it gets encrypted. And then the ciphertext then goes into the next block, okay? So then that little bit of randomness feeds all the way through the system. And then you do get that classic static look for the picture at the end. Okay. So there's different ways of doing CBC modes. You can see the one down the bottom as well. But the whole idea is you get that randomness that goes in and it feeds onto the next block, to the next block, to the next block, right? And it does mean that you have to get all the blocks lined up to get the right thing back, but you have to do that anyway. So yeah. Next. Right. Okay, so we talked about symmetric key ciphers, and the reason why they're called symmetric key ciphers is that they use the same key to encrypt as to decrypt. Okay. Now, this is fine, but as we found out in the Enigma machine in Germany and other kinds of things, is that if you're using the same key, if the bad guys get a hold of that key, they can decrypt it, right? But the other thing that they found out in World War I and II is that you have to actually get the key to the other end. Does that make sense? So at one end, you're encrypting something, and then you send it out to the other end, and you have to decrypt it, right? But at the other end, when you decrypt it, you have to have the same key, right? So that's where the big trouble is, and that's where, like, you know, the issues with the Enigma machine was because the Allies captured an Enigma machine and they could work out how the keys worked, right? If that makes sense. So you know, we needed to have a different way of doing things with keys, right? So that's where some really smart people, Ron Rivest and Adi Shamir and Ron Adelman, in America, came up with the RSA encryption algorithm. And with the RSA encryption algorithm, it's based on mathematics. It's based on modular arithmetic, and you can have a look at the example there, but you don't need to understand it. I'm not going to explain it too much. But the students don't need to understand it either, unless you're doing grade 12, I think. If you're doing grade 12, this is part of the curriculum, I'm sure. So so anyway, for those people not doing grade 12, then yeah, there's a public key and a private key, right? The public key is released to everybody, and it doesn't matter that everybody knows it. The private key, though, is your own, and you keep it secret, right? So what happens is someone uses your public key to encrypt something, and they give it to you, but only you can decrypt it because only you have the private key. Okay, does that make sense? And so that's the philosophy behind behind asymmetric cryptography or public key cryptography. Okay, and we use public key cryptography all the time now. And the main advantage of doing that is because you do not have to distribute a secret to everybody, if that makes sense. All right. So with symmetric keys, you have to distribute the secret key to all the trusted people that you want to decrypt it. Right. Whereas with public key stuff, you can distribute a public key to everybody. Even my worst enemy, I can give them my public key, and they won't be able to decrypt the message, right? Whereas, yeah, so we use it all the time, and the great advantage of doing it is that we can then send secure messages between people we've never met before. And so this is what happens. You can go and have a secure communication with a website that you've never been to before, okay, purely because of public keys and private keys, right? So yeah, you can look at the mathematics here. It all comes down to really large number exponentiation. This example here is a very small number exponentiation, and it's all about the selection of numbers, right? The selection of the keys to make sure that when you do the other calculation at the other end, you get the original number back. Okay, so you can see here, 2 to the 5 mod 14 equals 4, right? And then when you go to the other side, if you go 4 to the 11 mod 14, again mod 14, same on both sides, you get 2. It's like mathematical magic. But if you sit down and work it out, it's all about the selection of those keys, right? So there's actually several keys, right? When we say public key and when we say private key, it's actually several numbers that get distributed, okay? All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so one of the key things is that, you know, we have the messages that get encrypted. Now, in real life, when we do things on the internet nowadays, because we're doing mathematics, everything has to be numbers, right? So when we are going to do these calculations, we might have a message that says, "Hello, how are you today?" Right? Or a top secret message. It's actually got to be encoded first, so that our algorithms can actually run the mathematics over it, right? So you convert it to hexadecimal, and from hexadecimal you can run it through, right? So this is an important thing for you and the kids to understand for when you do the practical things with ciphers, is that you have to make sure that they're in the right format or in a way that the system can convert it into it, right? So hexadecimal is usually a thing that these systems will accept. So you have to convert things into hexadecimal before you run the maths, run the actual encryption algorithm. And then, of course, at the other end, when you're trying to work out what the message is, it'll come in hexadecimal, and you have to convert it back into, you know, English so we can read what the message is. Okay, so just understand that these are the types of steps that probably don't show up so much in textbooks, but yeah, you know, when you do the theory, but when you do the practice, yeah, that makes a difference. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, I think I've probably outdone my welcome. We've almost gone. I'm sure everyone's kind of sitting back and bored. I do have a cheat sheet for students, and I do realize that there are a wide range of students out there, so all the way from grade 7 to grade 12. And so I guess we are depending on teachers in a way to support some of the younger students who might not have seen things before. So there are 2 online web pages which you can access from the virtual machine. So the virtual machines have got Internet Explorer, no, Edge, sorry, Edge on there, so you can fire up Edge, and you can go to Boxcentric or to CyberChef. These are 2 really good kind of websites for decoding things. You can go to other websites too. Boxcentrics has a lot of explanation on there as well, whereas CyberChef is pretty much a let's just crack this kind of thing. So with CyberChef, you can just paste the text in there, find the mode, or just try anything, drag and drop things into the recipe, and then just hit go, and then you can try things. So you can do things that way, or you can go to the other webpage that I said before, and there's another website, Decode, that has lots of really good online tools for you to try out as well. And all of them work in different ways. Yeah, so so there are some classic ciphers which I expect a lot of people to be able to get their teeth into, and then we have our modern ciphers as well. Now, don't tell the kids this, but we only got 2 examples of modern ciphers, which is AES and RSA. Now, one of the things you might say, well, you know, we've got our public key ciphers. Why do we need AES anymore? Why do we need symmetric key ciphers? Right? And that's because RSA and public key encryption only work for very short strings. It's hugely inefficient for really long strings. There's no chaining mode like there is inside the block ciphers. Okay, so what we do in all our systems nowadays is we use RSA to transmit an AES key, right? And then we can use that to send that message. So it's like sending the courier to the other end through the enemy, you know, things with a secret message. But once that's there, both ends then share the key, and then we can use AES to send larger messages. Okay, so that's one of the things to realize for the competition as well. You know, you want to look for an RSA key, which will then, you know, be able to decrypt some AES keys, which will then be able to decrypt a larger message for you. All right, so for advanced students who really enter Python programming, you know, you don't have to use any of the built-in tools that we put in there, and I'll talk about tools in the next session a bit more. Maybe I'll give a little demonstration of them, but yeah, for those advanced students, I imagine they can write the code. There's AES and RSA libraries that are being pre-done in Python already. So there's actually a cryptography library, which is a standard one that you could use, but there's also PyCryptodome, which is an alternative. You can use that as well to write your code. So you can use Python to crack your classic ciphers or to crack your modern ciphers as well. Okay, you know, for those, you could probably say that for the high school students that run through this in a couple of hours and say, hey, write your own program to do it as well. That might maybe take them a little bit longer. Right, so for non-programmers, if you do need to do a bit of AES or RSA encryption and decryption, there is another commonly used tool. It's a Linux tool, but we ported it over for Windows, and that's OpenSSL. So there's some commands there, some example commands there that I've given for you guys to maybe not to give to the students, but maybe if they're stuck or something like that, you can have a look and see. You know, the very first command there is all about generating a public key pair, and it usually outputs to a .pem file. For your own interest, if you've never done it before, I'd recommend running that and then looking at the .pem, the private .pem file, and having a look inside and say it's just text, and mainly because it is ones and zeros, but they conveniently encoded in base 64. So it's kind of like human readable. It's letters at least, so you can see it. But you can at least see how long it is as well and get a feeling for it. So inside the .pem file is both a public key and a private key embedded together. So there's a second command there which separates out the public key. And you know, if you're going to do some encrypted messages, you can send that public key out to everybody. And of course, the third example there is how do you encrypt something using public keys in there. And then, of course, to decrypt it, it's the fourth line. The fourth line there, you can see to encrypt something, you have to use the public key to encrypt it, but then only the person with the private key can decrypt it. Okay, if that makes sense, right? And so the private key you keep private, you don't show anybody. Whereas the public key you can just give to anybody, right? So just don't get the two mixed up, because then it's horribly, horribly wrong then. Yeah. And I've marked a lot of exams and I've seen people get them mixed up. So yeah. All right, and then so OpenSSL also does AES algorithms as well, and you can see OpenSSL does a whole bunch of algorithms. So if you just type OpenSSL by itself and hit enter, it just scrolls up off the screen with all the algorithms. But for us, all of the algorithms that we're using are AES and RSA. And in that last example, you can see there, it's going to decrypt a message, right? But it's going to use a key. So the -K gives the key. And you can see here that key is actually in hexadecimal because it's ones and zeros and A, B's and C's, right? And then it also has a initialization vector, an IV, okay? So the IV, again, is a second number that you have to include. Does that make sense? So that's the whole reason why I introduced IV to you, in terms of, like, most of the time, beginner cryptography, they don't actually tell you about the IV, right? But to decrypt something properly, you need to have an IV, and you need to put things in, right? Put it in as a parameter, okay? So then, yeah, the IN is an encrypted message, and then out, of course, is the decrypted message. Yeah, so those are the parameters inside there. Are there questions? Ross had already gone ahead. He's wanting to go out, so.
No. This, I was just like, oh, am I going to the next one? That was awesome.
You can definitely go on to the next one. So hopefully that was like encryption in a nutshell. And yeah, so hopefully that helps all the people out there, especially for those people who haven't kind of taught in that area before. I do believe that the new curriculum has got cryptography in it, but it's only like the last trimester, last term of grade 12 or something like that. So this might be a look ahead for some of the people in the class, and certainly, you know, it is new material, and like, people learn things the best when they discover them themselves. So, you know, I encourage yourselves and the students to do a lot of Googling and, you know, reading you know, articles online and things like that. Are there questions? I don't know. I haven't.
Oh, yeah, hang on. I got one here. So got some year 10 students. So Cara 9. So,
it's in year 10 now. Okay, great. So
yeah.
you guys knew all that already. Hey, I didn't need to give the talk.
No, that was great. Like, yeah.
But yeah, no. So hopefully, yeah, that means you guys can be able to handle this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it is like this technical. I think, you know, it's one of those situations where I think these digital native students will always probably have a lot more. I guess that's old folks that haven't been around tech.
So we've set up the questions. We've set up the questions so that there's multiple steps. So hopefully some of the students will get some of the way. There's some tricky ones inside there as well. And yeah, but there needs to be an understanding of how the keys fit together. Yep.
And what's your biggest? So without giving too much away, what would be your biggest piece of advice if students get stuck?
I don't know. Google.
Research and learn more about a particular
research
topic.
and try things out. You know, I guess one of those things is like trying to decrypt things or crack things, or even as we go further on into, you know, security competitions and stuff like that, it can get frustrating. But it's one of those things that you just have to try to chip away at. And I believe, I haven't talked to Marnie about it, but I would recommend that Marnie kind of thinks about giving hints away as we get further into the into the 2 weeks or 3 weeks that you guys get to do the challenge.
Yeah, we've discussed that.
Sorry? Considered
it. Yeah. So it's always nice to have some hints, maybe some kind of system so you can take the hints.
We always monitor that, and that's something we do in the back end, is we monitor this and the response rates. Like, you know, last year there was you know, I think it was a week into it, and there was barely any responses from the team. So what we did was we went out with a whole bunch of hints and tips and just, hey, you know, don't forget you've only got a week to go. So, you know, we'll keep an eye on this in the back end and make sure that, you know, the submissions are coming through, and if they're not, you know, we'll liaise and kind of give you some heads up on that. So if there's no more questions, I'll just double check. They amaze me every day, mate. Yeah, it's great. Curriculum has it, but not technical inside AS and R. Yeah, Bryson. Look, that's really why we're doing in this competition is, like I said, this is industry standard. Like, we want them to be across the terminology and all those tools and bits and pieces that they're using in industry. And you know, we've written incursions, or Marnie has written the cyber incursions that are mapped to the national curriculum, and you might have seen those. And that whole point of that is to start bringing a lot of these technical concepts to life. So the next PD session is on the 25th of the 2nd. Have a look at that Cyber Pathways website, and you'll see the ASC tab and drop there there to book into it. Reach out if you've got any questions over the next few days leading up. If there's some concerns around lead time to obviously get things sorted from your end for the students, let me know. If there's specific information I can give to you prior to help fast track that, I'm more than happy to see what we can do there. Again, thanks for coming along. Ernest, Marnie, did you have anything you wanted to add today?
Come along to the next Teacher PD. Next time I'll be talking about I'll be talking about password cracking. So yeah,
Not more technical. So each session now, because today a lot of you, as you noticed, was more mechanics and how it works. A lot of the first half. They'll be quite technical. A lot of these webinars as well. If you've got any feedback or thoughts or things you'd like to see included, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to look at that and just understand what's best going to support you to kind of support the students. But look, thanks for coming along. Appreciate it. It's going to be a really good. Michaela, how much time do you think students will need to allocate this first challenge? The first challenge will obviously take longer. Like, you know, they're familiarizing themselves with everything. We've allocated 6 to 10 hours in the virtual machine. But again, go through, don't just jump into this and start going through the machine. Like I said to a lot of schools, treat this as you're cooking, right? This is a recipe. Go and understand everything before you start doing everything, and understand how you're going to break this up. I think it's imperative to go through the theory and the practice stuff first. Do that. Then sit down and look at the challenge and go, right, what have I got to do? Think about it, plan it a little bit, and then their time will be a lot quicker. You know, and again, this isn't a time challenge. This is about quality of answers. So we don't take this as how fast you get through it. It's actually how right you are with the solutions that you find, and some of them aren't that easy. So that's probably the biggest bit of advice there. But look, what we found last year, there was one student absolutely nailed first round in, I think it was like 6 hours. Like we hadn't even gotten home from work and they'd submitted all their answers. But we had some students that like took quite a while to get it done. But to put that into context, that student that submitted the answer the first day, their team didn't even get through the next round because they didn't work as a team. They didn't collaborate. They didn't crack all the passwords. And from what we understood, they didn't take the time to read the questions properly and thoroughly and actually understand what they had to do. They just went off and just started doing stuff, and yet fine, and they were great, but they missed kind of the big point of what they were trying to teach them in that piece. So if there's no more questions, we'll let you go. I know it's late. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Thanks, Marnie. And I was just going to say, I had an issue with the virtual machines that you shared earlier. I was able to sign in, but encountered an error. So look, again, we'll do some testing next week. Like I said, now that you've got the virtual machine, that's exactly what the students will be using. So go and do some testing on your school networks with that, because that's part of the puzzle. And if you have any problems, please reach out. But you should be okay once you might be about whitelisting or getting IT involved. But yeah, definitely reach out. We're here to support you throughout this challenge. And if you've got any technical issues, we'll work through those with you on an individual basis. But once you get the tech up and running, it'll run like clockwork generally.
Peter, if there was an error on that, could you send through a screenshot of it, if that's okay?
Yeah, I think I saw that. I might flick that to you, Ernest, as well. But look, we'll let you go. It's dinner time, and I want to thank you guys for coming along tonight. And we're excited. It's a big week. We're doing 12-hour days at the moment to get through this, but it's going to be really good competition, and I think the students are going to learn a lot. So down to next week. Let us know if you need anything, and have a lovely evening.